listening to the number one source for political, pop culture, and sports talk on the radio. The Julio Rivera Show. Hashtag Conservarican. With no fuck left to give. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, hit it!
We are controlling transmission.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Julio Rivera Show is on.
And popping! Wow. Today's show is a pre-recorded conversation, a fantastic conversation I had with a great guy and a staunch conservative and a fantastic journalist and columnist, my buddy John Hawkins. This was pre-recorded prior to the debate which took place last night. I just wanted to give you some thoughts on what occurred last night. Donald Trump, I think, won going away. He was the most presidential, prepared. He hit on all of his points. I think Hillary Clinton truly exposed herself as the run-of-the-mill, lying politician that we all are well aware that she is. I mean, this woman was talking blatantly out of both sides of her mouth. She is the epitome of the crooked, lying, misleading politician. I mean, the answer, when she was confronted on the open borders and global economy question, based on the transcript of the speech that she had given to the, I think it was a Brazilian energy, some sort of a organization that she gave that speech to. That was the most, and I'm gonna use foul language here. It was the biggest bullshit answer I've ever heard in my life. She's talking about an open energy grid. First of all, the energy grid is vital to the survival of Americans. People don't realize how crippled this country would be if our energy grid was to go down. I remember a couple of years ago, I think actually it might have been like 10 years ago, about a decade ago, where we had an issue where we temporarily had an issue with the energy grid. There was chaos. There was mayhem. People couldn't communicate with each other. We would immediately be taken down to the level of the third world without energy. Seriously. That fast. So you're going to want an open energy grid where we can't account for the security of that energy? She knew she was lying when she gave that bullshit answer. And first of all, how the hell are you going to build an open energy grid and connect us to Europe and Africa and Australia? Donald Trump sounded like an austere constructionist last night when talking about defending the Bill of Rights, talking about the appointment of who his Supreme Court justices would be. I was proud of what I heard last night. And you know what? It was kind of a throwback to back during the very beginning of his campaign. We in the Ted Cruz camp had a little joke that we would say about Donald Trump, where we would say, "Oh, Donald Trump is brilliant. You know, he's basically he's coming up with all these wonderful ideas," and then we would go, "Oh yeah, but he's just stealing them from Ted Cruz," because they sounded so similar. And since then, it was easy to attack him for his past as a Democrat, and some of the positions he had taken as a Democrat. But I truly, based on what he said last night, and his staunch opposition to Hillary Clinton, I believe that Donald Trump has come around. He is a moderate to somewhat conservative Republican. And I think the country would be in much better shape under a Donald Trump presidency than it would be under, obviously, any kind of a Hillary Clinton presidency. But those are my thoughts. I got to go right now, and we're going to go right into my buddy, the great John Hawkins of Right Wing News, columnist for Town Hall, actually, this is one of the longest interviews I've ever done, and we're going to go into that right now. I want you guys to listen and enjoy.
You're listening to the number one source for political, pop culture, and sports talk on the radio. The Julio Rivera Show. Hashtag Conservarican. With no fuck left to give. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, hit it.
We are controlling transmission.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Julio Rivera Show is on.
And popping. And as promised, Mr. Right Wing News, John Hawkins, joins us now. How are you, John?
I'm fantastic. Great to be on with you.
All right, well, we're really excited here. We're getting now down to crunch time, man. We're here. It's about 3 weeks until the election, as we're broadcasting this on the Julio Rivera Show, hashtag Conservarican, which you can finally catch on the new and improved www.conservarican.com, part of the Lanterns Radio Network. And we wanted to talk to you specifically tonight about this third debate upcoming in a couple of days. It's going to be moderated by Chris Wallace of Fox News. It's going to be the Q&A format of the first debate, which Trump didn't do too well in. But, obviously, this is going to be a different debate. He actually has a little bit of wind at his back based on his performance in the second debate. How do you see this one shaping up for Trump?
Well, it's hard to say. It was pretty plain to me that he did a lot more debate prep for the second one. I got the impression in the first one he just was not ready for it at all, didn't do anything on it. This time it sounded like he had a game plan. He was very ready, and he did well. I thought he won the second debate as badly as Clinton won the first one, so he got it. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. If you're Hillary Clinton, you really have no incentive to debate at this point, to go to the third debate. But I tend to think it's going to happen, and we'll have to see how it goes. I mean, a lot of people will be tuning in, but he does need to make up some ground at this point, because realistically, he's probably 4 to 6 points behind, at least 4 to 5. So he needs to make up ground. He really needs that debate, and he needs to kill in it.
Yeah, he's definitely outside of margin for error. One of the things in the first debate that I thought was interesting, and I don't think it was played up enough, was that Hillary Clinton at one point stated that she had been getting ready for the debate, preparing for the debate, when Trump made the statement that he was out actually going into, like, the black communities and listening to the problems. That really somebody, if you're going to go out there and be president, the way that I think prepare to be president is to go out and listen to the people, get a feel for what their issues are, and that's the best preparation. So that way when you go into office, you know what you need to do to help them. But that's one of those things, like, Hillary Clinton's gotten a pass the entire time. She will continue to get a pass no matter what happens, no matter what WikiLeaks comes out with, no matter what, and we've seen a lot of things that would have been played out differently by the mainstream media had they been against Trump. There was the speech transcripts that came out, the comments that she made about having two different sets of agenda, the public agenda and the private agenda. What do you think that this is just completely insurmountable? I mean, I know that we've talked about this before, and you seem to think that when Trump was nominated that was pretty much the victory there for Hillary because Trump can't necessarily win. Is there anything that you think he can do between now and Election Day to maybe change that?
I'm going to be honest, I hate to depress your listeners, but probably not. I mean, I thought for a long time, I've been saying it's just he's going to have too many difficulties. He was wildly unpopular. His numbers have not improved. He is behind. I mean, in that last debate, he did win, but keep in mind, that was after the tape had come out, and he was already behind before the tape. So he might have staunched the bleeding, but it's a thing where he staunched the bleeding from the bottom completely falling out. I think he's behind. And the thing that also has got to be a little scary when you look at the fact that he's behind operation. He's relying on the RNC, which is kind of like relying on FEMA to rescue you after a hurricane. That's not really what they're designed to do. And so I think it's really, the wind is really blowing hard against him. You never say never, I guess, but it's tough. I think he's got a real uphill battle. Right now, if you're looking at it, she's got a pretty good lead. I mean, it would be tough. He would have to win some states where it looks like he is not going to win, along with a bunch of states he should win, but it looks like he's not going to win. So it's a tough road for him at this point.
Yeah, there's a lot of people talking about this supposed the hidden vote. You know, there's people that aren't, proudly, proclaiming their support for Trump, and that those people are going to show up on Election Day. I don't know how I feel about that. The one thing I will say, though, is the Democrats, they do run a first-class operation when it does come out to, come down to, registering voters and, staying. His numbers were down. The party still stuck together. Trump does not have a lot of support within Republicans. Obviously, we saw this weekend a lot of people stood against him. People that it was looking like he may get their support eventually. Before it was too late, they might come over and actually publicly endorse him and whatnot. We saw obviously Mike Lee. Ben Sass has never been a big fan of his, and obviously Paul Ryan, who's the most powerful Republican in the country. When you have that many people against you. But at the same time, on the flip side, that may feed into the anger of the American voter, disenfranchised by establishment politicians, and maybe they'll stand up and rise for Trump. But it boils down to, I think, especially in the Q&A format, we saw this with Lester Holt, when it seemed that, like you said, Trump wasn't really truly prepared for it. If he does prepare himself, and if he does give good answers in a respectable account of himself, maybe he does pull out. And if he does win 2 out of 3, especially the last one, which is big for momentum going into the election, maybe he can pull out those states where it's looking like he's not going to win. I know a lot of the swing state polling is looking a little bit bad for him. But we saw a report that came out where a major donor of Hillary Clinton was responsible for conducting the last NBC poll, which had him down by 11 points. So you can't really put that much stock into those votes. But people say you can't put a lot of stock into the non-scientific votes where Trump seems to be crushing Hillary too. So I think it's all over the place. I mean, I really don't know what to expect on Election Day.
Well, and again, I'm going to play devil's advocate on this one. And I think it's good for people to hear both sides of it, because, I mean, most of what you're getting from the conservative media is pretty positive on Trump. But here's the thing. I think, number one, when you're talking about it with the polls, we really haven't seen a lot of them yet. I mean, we had maybe, was that one poll after his comments, and that was before the debates. We actually need to see several, because no one poll do you take at face value. So he's got that going on. I don't necessarily know that there's a lot of this quiet, hidden Trump vote, because it didn't show up in the primaries. In the primaries, the polls did a generally good job of getting his level of support, although in several places, well, not just several, a bunch, he underperformed. And I think that's because of his lack of a proper get-out-the-vote operation. And, it's really hard to say how it goes, but I'll also tell you that that tape, and I know everybody's trying to downplay it, it's pretty damaging. If only from the fact that it caused a bunch of Republican senators like Mike Lee to say, I'm not endorsing this guy, or to pull their endorsements. Because so much of today what people look at is they say, the conservative guys, you can't trust them because they're biased to conservative. You can't trust the liberal guys, they're biased to liberals. So when you hear conservatives who are Republican senators saying, I'm pulling out, it does swing votes. And it's damaging. Plus, it's got him off track. I mean, the big news today is he's attacking Paul Ryan. And so him and Ryan got this thing going on. Well, the big news should be the WikiLeaks thing. Instead,
exactly.
Instead, the more interesting thing to people is him and Paul Ryan knocking heads. So it's a tough thing.
Yeah, but you know what this is? But this is what sickens me. Like literally sickens me is that you get the WikiLeaks coming out, and then why is not the and I've been pumping this a lot on social media. The entire tape as far as her laughing about when she had defended the rapist of the 12-year-old. This person raped a 12-year-old child. The evidence was mishandled. She admitted that the evidence had been mishandled, where they had cut out a portion of the underwear, the portion of the underwear that actually contained the blood of the rapist, and that evidence, that piece of evidence, was lost. She said that the person took a polygraph, that the person happened to pass the polygraph, which polygraphs are not 100% accurate, and she forever lost her faith in polygraphs based on that and had a chuckle about it. The fact that she would morally defend someone, that she would not recuse herself in a situation where she felt that the person that she had to defend was actually guilty of the crime. Why doesn't that get played up? I mean, when you consider that, you consider Juanita Broderick, you consider all of the allegations against her husband. This doesn't get splashed on the mainstream media at the same level that, him having a private conversation with Billy Bush, saying something really stupid, but at the same time, it does boil down to locker room talk. I mean, it is something stupid. Men do engage into it from time to time. But it was 11 years ago, and I think it should be inconsequential. I think what we should be talking about, like you said, is the WikiLeaks stuff. Hillary, and she is so flawed in so many ways. Is this now the America that we've become, that the media decides our elections for us?
Well, see, I have a couple things. One, I think the media has decided this election, but they did it by getting Republicans to pick Trump. And I have to say, a lot of our own Republicans went along with that because he brought in a lot of ratings, and there were people who were very excited about him, not so much because they loved the guy or couldn't see his flaws, but because Trump means ratings. So I think the people who pushed him the most benefited from that, and I think they got better ratings, like Sean Hannity, and the rest of us got to get Hillary out of it. But setting that aside, talking about Hillary, I mean, I thought it was devastating today that John Podesta, they have this email leaked out that says she doesn't like everyday people. Think about it. She doesn't like everyday people. She thinks Republicans are enemies. She says half of Trump's voters are deplorable. I mean, think about all of that. It's just unbelievable. This person, it's almost like we're going to be under occupation if and when she becomes president. And just think about one other little thing. Like, you've had this big news thing today. Al Gore, she's getting him out to help get the young person's vote out, which is ridiculous. But, okay, you got Bill Clinton, who's got sexual assaults on his record, and maybe a rape. I mean, she's certainly been accused of it credibly. You got that out there. Then you got Anthony Weiner, who is married to Huma Abedin. Then you've got Al Gore, who basically got rapey with a maid. You need a sexual assault unit following the Clinton campaign around for all the stuff they're doing to women. To me, see, that's something that would be a huge, huge issue. Everybody would be talking about if she were a Republican. She is getting a pass on it, and I think it's something she should be hit on more.
I know, but the whole thing that saves her is the fact that she's a woman, and the media is going to treat her differently. And there's a lot of people just lining up for that history vote. They're not voting on issues. Again, just like they voted in 2008 and 2012, they voted for color. They're voting for gender this time around. This is supposed to be, a historic moment for them. They're thinking, and that's the right way to go. But, Trump doesn't help that either with some of his inconsistencies. What I'm hoping for is a return to the Trump of a couple of weeks ago, prior to this horrific recording and the effect that it's had on his campaign. See, this is the problem with Trump. When he started to gain in the polls, when he needed a good week and a half of model behavior, presidential, just seeming presidential, that's when he shoots himself in the foot. So whenever things are going good for Trump, and you never know what's going to be the next thing. I mean, he was on Howard Stern several times. This guy, they were talking today about Mark Burnett, and Mark Burnett says that they weren't going to release anything, but you never know if there's an NBC employee, perhaps a disgruntled employee that maybe had access to some of the outtakes from The Apprentice, and you never know if that's going to come out. I mean, if you're the Trump camp, you're kind of on eggshells the entire time, and it makes it difficult. The one thing that I will give them credit for is that he has had energy the entire time. He has not stopped campaigning. outside of maybe canceling an event here and there, he's been consistently out there drawing big crowds. So, I mean, some people say that, well, that you know, and you alluded to it earlier, that maybe that doesn't exist, the hidden Trump vote. But I think based on the size of and I guess the rabidness sort of his following and the rise of the alt-right movement, which has kind of propelled him, maybe he has a shot, but it's definitely not going to be anything where he's going to be strong. I think this is going to be the one thing that I think does help him, though, is I think this is going to be one of a national election where you're going to have, and tell me if you agree with this, a low turnout on both sides.
Well, that's interesting. A bunch of interesting stuff there. First of all, the alt-right, I don't think the alt-right is that big. I think they're big on Twitter. And I think percentage-wise, if you start getting into it, they're a very small group of people. Now, I could be wrong about that, but that's the feeling and impression I've gotten. Because if you look and you start saying that, what you got to see if these guys are really all that influential, anything is what kind of inroads they're making. And I know people have said, hey, Breitbart is now an alt-right publication. Well, not really. They don't push the things these guys are pushing. As to what you said about Trump being more presidential, that kind of thing, and his numbers going up, that was 100% true. What we have seen over and over throughout this whole election campaign is that whoever's in the news most, him or Hillary, their numbers go down. So we see over and over. So when and I've said this, the best thing Donald Trump could do, and I've been saying this for months, if you want him to win, is be boring. Be the dullest person, be as dull as Mitch McConnell. And you know why? Because the less people are talking. Like right now, if he were super dull, what would be happening? Everybody would be talking about WikiLeaks. And Hillary's numbers would be going down. But because he is saying, he's saying this explosive stuff about Paul Ryan, and his spokesperson's tweeting out stuff about Paul Ryan, and it's drawing attention towards him. And we've seen over and over and over again that it might have gotten through the primaries, but it has hurt him in the general. So, yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, a lot of interesting stuff, and I think Trump, the best thing he could do, and he's probably not going to do it, would be boring from now until then.
Yeah, you know what's the craziest part of it is when you have a country that's, almost $20 trillion in debt, $100 trillion in unfunded liabilities, we got 95 million people out of the workforce, labor force participation, anemic at about 62%, all these issues. This should be an election about ideas and issues to save America, but instead it's become the ultimate mudslinging competition all the way through from the primary on the Republican side up through, now the general. The one thing that the Democrats did do where they probably consolidated a lot of support for their candidate, whoever it was going to be, was the fact that they actually did run a primary based on ideas and issues, and Bernie Sanders actually kind of set the table for that to his detriment, I think, by, early on when I believe it was the first debate, he said that he didn't want to discuss the emails. Enough about the emails. I think if he would have capitalized on that, and I think if he would have known what was going on behind the scenes at the DNC, he would have, because obviously he had no idea that they were playing him for a fool the entire time, and Debbie Wasserman Schultz was working against him privately. But I think that the fact that they ran more of a conventional primary on their side, they consolidated a lot of their base, whereas the Republican base is all over the place. You still have a lot of people that aren't going to vote for Trump, even though they know what the alternative is. Trump has a lot of people that are, some of them are Republicans, but some of them are independents, and some of them are even Democrats, or people that maybe haven't even voted in a couple of cycles. So you can't really rely on them as to whether or not they're going to be there. So there's a lot of things to be worried about at this point.
Yeah, and I did not answer one other interesting thing you said in your last question, too, about turnout. If you take the most enthusiastic voters, the enthusiasm is definitely on Trump's side. There are more enthusiastic voters for Trump. Now, the downside is they're going to have the way you turn out, what it does, like having a strong turnout game, is it gets the people who are not enthusiastic to turn out and vote. That's how you win elections, by margins, and you crank them up by 2 or 3%. You get those people who are likely to stay home to turn out, and he doesn't have it, and she does. And that's one thing that's going to be tough. But even with the enthusiasm gap, you've also got to look at the fact that he's a little behind. And you start saying, all right, who is he behind with that he could bring over? Because, he has got white working-class guys locked down, but he really needs to get in, for example, more women, more white women in particular, like more than any other group. And, these comments don't help him with that. and it's tough.
Well, do you think that, and I said this a couple of weeks ago, when he came out with the, well, actually, it was right after 9/11, right? Right after 9/11, we saw Hillary Clinton, stumbling, and, there was something that she lost her shoe, and something fell out, and people were speculating what that was. And Donald Trump you would think that the original Donald Trump that we've been seeing since June would have jumped on that. And what he did was, he didn't bring it up. He didn't play himself as, I'm going to attack the woman, while she's down, while she's sick. Then he rolled out simultaneously these pro-women initiatives. He came out with we're going to make the child care thing tax deductible fully. We're going to, give 6 paid weeks of maternity leave. These are policies that would play well with women. And so, I mean, if you look at it, and if you look at the population as a whole, right? If you look at it, blacks and minorities tend to vote at a lower percentage than white people do. And you have to remember that white people are still, by far, the majority in this country. I mean, black people only really represent about 13 to 15% of the population. Hispanic, a little bit more than that. But, I mean, white people are still a solid, 60 to 65% of this country. So if he is truly consolidating the working white male, you would think that he has maybe a better shot than people are speculating, no?
Well, and there is some truth to that, because if the one big question, this is one thing that you've got to worry about with the polls, how accurate they are, is that Obama did so well because he got black and Hispanic Americans to turn out at a very high rate, a much higher rate in the past. Hillary does not excite these people the same way that Barack Obama did. So can she get them to turn out? There's no way she can get them to turn out the same rate as Barack Obama. Now, that makes you wonder, are they overrepresented? Now, with Trump, his thing is...
voter fraud. I just wanted to jump in.
You got that too.
Voter fraud, yeah.
You got voter fraud going on, too. I mean, there's always some voter fraud going on. Could it be enough to swing states? Maybe. I mean, one of the things is you get in these... I guess this is a whole complicated issue, but I wish in places like Philadelphia or Chicago, we put more of an effort into reaching out to black Americans. Trump has actually, to his credit, done some of that in his campaign. Because, basically all the Democrats do is they figure, all right, we just need to get everybody in this area to turn out because all of them are going to vote for us. And they're pretty much right. I mean, you got places in those cities that go 98% Democrat. I mean, think about that. So basically all you got to do, voter turnout, is get every person you can find to vote. Well, let's say 20% of those people are Republican. Suddenly it makes their work so much harder. So that's, to his credit, that is one thing I think Trump has done better than other Republicans, is he at least goes out and asks for people's vote. And I think that's to his credit.
Yeah, and the one thing you have to remember, too, with Hillary Clinton is, a lot of these minorities remember, the time when her husband was president. And it didn't really get better for them then, and a lot of people, those same people are still in the same situation. So they may actually look at Hillary Clinton as a part of that establishment which they have not been able to thrive under, and they may just take the bait with Trump and say, hey, what do we have to lose? Because we've already lived through a Clinton presidency. We can't, and a lot of them in their minds, they can't think, well, ideologically or from a platform stance, they're not going to get much different. I mean, Bill Clinton did actually sign NAFTA into law. The principles obviously were negotiated under the Bush administration, but it was actually put into force under Bill Clinton. And, these international trade deals and these open border policies, they ultimately hurt the minorities the most in this country. I mean, the blacks and the Latinos, the legal Latinos that are in here, are the ones that are hurt the worst by illegal immigration.
Yeah, and all of that is true. And it's one of the saddest things you see over and over, because you have these areas that, like Detroit or New Orleans, that are run by Democrats for decades and decades, and then they fall to pieces and they're complete disasters, and the thing is, it's the white Republicans' fault. Well, there's no white Republicans running anything in these areas. They're all Democrats, and you know what they do? They come out and they ask people for their votes every 4 years, and then they say thanks, and they don't care about them for the next 4. And then, that's just how it works. Now, part of it, too, we as Republicans fail, because we have not consistently made the push to these people. We've got to come out to these people, even though it's hard, even though it's not profitable, even though we're going to get called racist. Maybe not you, me. to show up. And now Democrats will at least show up at a rally somewhere. But like I've heard people complain, it's like, like even with Asian Americans, you have this big Asian American festival, you'll have a Democrat, either the congressman or senator will show up, or at least they'll send an aide, and Republicans have nobody there. And Donald Trump, what he's doing, like I said, is good, but it would be a lot better if we were making a consistent effort to reach out to people, because a lot of Black and Hispanic Americans are told nonstop that Republicans and conservatives hate them, and we're prejudiced against them, and we want nothing but failure for them. And then, so they listen to the Republican side, and nobody shows up to tell them anything different. So why else would they not believe this? They look at it and they say, well, I guess so. There's no Republicans here telling me anything different. So I do appreciate what Donald Trump did in that area, and I'd like to see more people doing it. I think that's something, probably one of the most urgent things we can do as Republicans, is to reach out to people and let them know, hey, we do care about you. Because until people know you care, they don't care what you think.
Yeah, and that's something I salivate over, the prospect of having the opportunity to do that. And I'm not going to name names of campaigns, and it's not the obvious ones that you may think, but it's just I've actually offered to go into areas and speak to Latinos and Blacks and things like that. And it's just that you don't always get. I don't think that it's prioritized nearly as enough as it should be. Because I think that if they saw the vision, if they saw more Tim Scotts, if they saw more Marco Rubios, if they saw more, I can't think of her name, from Martinez from New Mexico, people like that, they need to show face, and they need to be on the campaign trail right now alongside Trump, reaching out into these areas to do that, because, you're never going to get that vote, and history continues to repeat itself in these areas. If you look at Detroit, you look at every major liberal metropolis that's been ran into the ground, that's fiscally unsustainable. What's really killing our country are the liberal states. If you look at where our debt goes to, and what the places that are really bleeding the American taxpayer, these are the places that make the current the situation in America unsustainable. The red states, you've got red states that are operating with a surplus. If every state was governed that way, wouldn't it make perfect sense to think that maybe, after it'd be a little bit hard, you'd have to do some entitlement reform, you'd have to do some of the stuff that actually was done in the 90s under the Republican House, where they were doing the welfare to work programs and things like that. But it's not like it's not doable. It just takes the political will to go ahead and actually fight to do it. But, that's what happens.
Well,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, the problem with it is, right now, is that Democrats have realized that it's to their electoral advantage to simply come out and say Republicans want to cut off old people, and they want them to be sick and die in the streets, which, of course, none of that's true. But when they're doing that, and Republicans who, in good faith, come forward and say, listen, we don't want to do that. We want to save the system. We want there to be Social Security in 20 years that means something. Because right now there's not going to be that. If you're a young kid, if you're 25, you are not going to have Social Security, not in any meaningful sense, or Medicare in any meaningful sense. It's not going to exist. So, but when the electorate says, well, we are going to listen to the scary voices more than the other people, it gets people to the point where they're not going to push for it. And what's going to happen, and this is sad, is that we're going to have some major problems here in America because of it. Because there's been all kinds of warnings. Look at what's happening in Greece. Look at Puerto Rico. Look at Detroit. You can see where these policies that we're following are going to take us. But even when we lost our credit rating, world credit rating, people are like, not that much happened. So they don't see that impact in their own life, and so they think it's not important. It is incredibly important. It is going to break us in a way that the Nazis never did, the Japanese never did, the British never did. It's going to, knock us back. Our whole country is going to suffer tremendously when we get to the point where we cannot pay our bills. There is going to come a time when we may not, Social Security checks may not go out because they don't have the money and they can't borrow it. That's real world, and I look at all the people who are going to get hurt, and, you can only do what you can do. It's just one of those things where if people are going to reward the Democrats for being completely irresponsible about it, they're going to get away with it. And I wish that wasn't the case, because the country is going to get hurt so bad because of that.
Yeah, do you remember a couple of, I think it was maybe about a year ago, where they had, I forgot where in the United States, but they had some sort of an issue with the EBT cards weren't working, and the people went nuts and they ransacked the Walmart. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I can't remember what city it was, but yeah, I remember the incident. Yeah,
exactly. But that's like tantamount to what we see in places like Venezuela, where you get people going in there and killing each other for a loaf of bread and things like that. And we're really, I think, we're at the tipping point, and I think we have been for a long time. And that's where the media. Because think about it, under the Barack Obama administration, for so many quarters, there was a fiscal cliff. They had to raise the debt ceiling. There was, a government shutdown. There was every quarter, at the end of every quarter, it seemed for a while there was like a major financial crisis. But, downplayed again by the media. And then when we finally did have a shutdown, they tried to blame the Republicans for it. So it's just like, it's almost like damned if you do, damned if you don't. We're never going to win with the media. And the media is the one, like I said, to quote what I said earlier, it's kind of deciding the direction and the path that the country is going.
Well, a lot of these things, it's the media, it's the schools, it's the culture. Like Andrew, one of my favorite quotes about politics is Andrew Breitbart saying that politics is downstream from culture. And we conservatives have made this horrible mistake over the years of continuing to support people that don't support us. I mean, your school is liberals. What are you doing about it? Have any Republicans gone and said, listen, you guys are way too liberal. Either you straighten it out or we're going to cut off your funds. We keep going to movies where they trash us. We keep watching TV shows where they trash us. How many people are still watching NFL football where they're sitting out there and disrespecting the flag, these privileged, pampered athletes who are talking, it's a lot of oppression going on. These are the most pampered people on earth. And they're talking about, and we keep giving them our money, and liberals, why would these people, why would they pay attention to us? I mean, look, if you're Apple, think about it like this. Like, think about the bathroom law in North Carolina.
Oh, yeah.
Most ridiculous thing in the world, right? Apple does businesses with countries where they kill people for being gay. But they're sitting here, and they're willing to pull out of North Carolina. Because North Carolina does not want to have, grown men who in the bathroom with female girls. Mm-hmm. Now, why would they do that? They'll do that because, you know what? Conservatives will keep buying their stuff. But liberals will get upset if they do anything to upset them. If the squeaky wheel always gets the grease, and liberals are always okay with it, and conservatives are just going to be super tolerant, which that's what it is, we're way, way, way more tolerant than liberals. We should be less tolerant. I mean, I'm a big believer in boycotts. I mean, I did a live video on our Facebook page today and wrote a column about it, talking about how people should boycott the NFL. Look at what happened with the female Ghostbusters movie. Mm-hmm. The fact that movie lost $100 million did more to probably convince these guys they need to stop making movies that are to the left than anything you or I or anybody conservative could ever say. Because they don't care about us, and they don't care about what's good for the country. Now, their bottom line, they care about that a lot. And we can influence that. We're a huge part of the country. We've just got to be willing to take action and do it.
Yeah, and in a lot of ways, we're the main producers and consumers in a sense, because we're the ones that actually contribute to the system and work in a lot of ways. I mean, I'm not going to say that they're, that's completely proportionate that way, but, we do have a lot of influence, and I think in a lot of the most powerful lobby in this country, or one of the most powerful lobbies, the NRA. I mean, you got so many people, so many millions of people that are within that have rejected that. I mean, look at Jim Carrey. Jim Carrey can't make a successful movie anymore after he came out and he did the what was he trying to pretend to? I think he was denigrating Charleston Heston and speaking out against guns and things like that. And like his career went into the tank right after that because conservatives have money and they're not going to spend it on things that pretty much crap on our culture. In our listen, we live in the greatest society in the world. I think what they're doing is they're shaming regular Americans. Like with the North Carolina thing, with when you look at the hypocrisy of these companies doing business with countries that still have slavery and still marginalize the power of women, and they kill people for being gay, and they do all these horrible things. But I think what they're doing in this country is they're trying to shame us in order to promote that kind of that globalist sort of that's ultimately what they want to do. They want an open border society. They want us to absorb the problems of the rest of the world. They want us to take refugees in. They want us to have Sharia zones. They want us to do all these things that are failing in Europe in a huge way. Europe's on fire right now, and they want to bring it to the United States. Hillary Clinton wants to bring in 65,000 refugees next year if she's the president, to go on top of, and people were sharing it today and talking about it, the 300,000 refugees on work visas coming from predominantly Muslim countries, where first of all we can't vet these people coming in. Now we're going to let them come in a huge number, 300,000 this year, and then take jobs when we have 95 million people who aren't working. It's just backwards as it can possibly be, John.
It is, and I think that in particular Democrats, the people in the media, Hollywood, have lost respect for just the average person who doesn't want to get anything from the government, who just wants to go out and work and pay their bills and be left alone. They look at these people to be abused, as people to be to go out and use them as a piggy bank. Hey, you just pay money and then shut up. Then we're going to talk about how awful you are after we take your money. And we're going to give it to people who don't work as hard as you. And you know what? We're not even going to check it very closely because, we don't care if people have fraud there. And, we're not. I know you want the border secure, but we don't care what you want. We want the borders open. And a lot of this comes from that liberal mentality. It's a very utopian mentality that says, hey, we can create this heaven on earth and everything will be perfect. And, of course, the only way they can think of course, that's unrealistic and ridiculous, but how they look at doing it is, all right, we need to have more and more rules and more control in place. And government's got to get bigger and bigger and bigger, because the only way we can make people like you, who just want to be left alone, do what we want you to do, is we write a law. And we force you to do it. Or we're going to go out and say you're a horrible person because you don't want your 8-year-old daughter in there with a 30-year-old male sex offender in the bathroom. Oh, my gosh, you must be some kind of bigot. Well, it's ridiculous. The people who make the country work don't have that mentality, and they're the ones who are being laughed at and impugned and treated like garbage by the people who are in charge of the country. And the Republicans, I know a lot of people think like the Republican establishment's really liberal. Oh, they probably just agree with Hillary Clinton. They don't. Their problem is they're cowards. You see, they'll go out and they don't agree with her. I mean, generally, if you talk to me and someone like Mitch McConnell, okay, or John Boehner, we would probably agree on 95% of the issues. There would be some we disagreed on, mostly because they're just,
what? That's funny. I think I just wanted to stop you right there, but we had a Republican Congress that, despite that, still passed that omnibus that contained all that stuff in there. So I understand what you're saying. I think this is how I've always equated it. I think that the Republican establishment on foreign policy, on those types of issues, are like conservatives like us. They agree that the enemy is the enemy, and the enemy has to be destroyed, and we shouldn't be taking in refugees and things like that, like the Peter Kings and the people like that we consider like the big rhinos. They still agree with us on things like that. But at the same time, I still think that they're the Chamber of Commerce, those types of corporatist elements they're so deep in their pockets that's why you don't get them fighting for immigration enforcement and things like that, because they're making money off of it.
That's the other half of it. I mean, one half of it, the problem with these guys is that they're scared to death that they're going to get a negative article somewhere. I mean, they're not scared of offending their constituents. They're scared of some newspaper saying something bad about them. That's their mentality. So you start with that. But the other thing is exactly right. You've got the Chamber of Commerce's corporate crowd that comes up and gives them money. And they're very, very responsive to these people. So it's got to this point where it's like with immigration, that's what drives immigration. That's what drives their focus, their agenda. So when Americans are sitting here going crazy because, my gosh, we're getting ready to bring in all these Syrians and we can't vet them, and what are we doing about the border? And, look at what Barack Obama, he's putting these illegal executive orders. They're like, all right, well, we need to work on the corporate tax rate. Well, no, you don't. That's not your number one priority right now. And on immigration, my gosh, could anybody be more tone deaf than Republicans in Congress? I mean, how many times do people have to say, no, let's not do this? No. Can we at least secure the border before we start doing anything with the illegal immigrants that are here? Can you at least do that? And their answer is always, nah, we don't want to do that. Nobody really cares about that until it's election time, and they've got to get in front of the voters, and then they're talking like Tom Tancredo. They're talking like Jeff Sessions when it's election time, but you get them back in there, and they don't want to do anything. So, I don't think that they're necessarily by the business lobby. And that's just what is driving these guys. And it's sad because they're not going out there and fighting. If you're a conservative, they're so messed up by these things that you really don't have people representing your views the way liberals do. Because you can say what you want about Harry Reid and Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi. I think if you're a liberal, they serve your views pretty well.
Oh, yeah. They have accomplished a lot in the last 7.5 years. If that's what you were, if that's what you believe in, they did accomplish a lot. But just to get back to those Republicans, they truly are what what you can refer to as campaign conservatives. And you brought up the immigration issue, and I spoke about this at length over the last couple of weeks before we took this hiatus from the show as I was putting together the website. And I've had a couple of people on, from Dinesh D'Souza to Lee Elsey and a couple of different people to discuss this issue. But I specifically feel this, right? I feel that self-deportation is a real concept. I think that the way that we actually solve that immigration problem, which would help the economy immensely. I mean, what we would do, first of all, is, right, you hit every industry that hires this illegal labor. You hit them to the point where they're not going to continue to hire these people. So that, in essence, once the well of opportunity dries up, I think people do start to leave. I think if you do that in concert with, make an initial investment, spend $10 billion now, right? Get the immigration, the deportation forces up, get all those mechanisms back and working the way that they're intended to work. If you put that 10, maybe $15 billion up front, you'll save yourself hundreds of billions, even maybe over $1 trillion in the long run. Because I think what's going to happen is people are going to see, the illegals that are here are going to see that, it's not here anymore. The opportunities aren't here anymore. They'll leave. I think a lot of them will truly leave. Or if the opportunities aren't there, the people that are enabling them to be here are going to have to make a decision. They're either going to have to take care of these people themselves, or they're going to have to turn their back on them too. So I think that maybe you go through the expense of deporting 3 million, and maybe another 5 to 7 leave on their own, and then you'll still have maybe another 10 here. But I think that the effect to the economy would be great as far as providing working opportunities to those people that are lesser skilled, that are the people that generally tend to sit on entitlement programs for years and generations sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the problems with it is they don't really want to do it. I mean, just to give you an example, I interviewed Mark Krikorian back in the day, and he talked about Operation Vanguard in Nebraska. Basically what they do is they would go out to all the different meat packing plants in the area, and ICE would do a raid. Or whatever, I can't remember, the Border Patrol, and back then it wasn't ICE back then. So they do a raid, and they would just check everybody's Social Security numbers. Well, what happened was they did 4 or 5 of these, and it was incredibly effective, and suddenly people started going nuts, and the program was shut down because it was working. And this is the thing, can self-deportation work? Absolutely. In fact, I know there's this idea because Mitt Romney said something about self-deportation that it's bad, but I can't see any evidence that hurt him at all during the election. I don't think it hurt him one iota, and it's reasonable, it's logical. I mean, look, if these guys cannot get jobs, they're going to leave. That's why most of them are here. So that requires us to put something in place that keeps illegal aliens from getting jobs. It shouldn't be that hard. It's like, all right, do you have a Social Security number? All right, well, is it legit or not? And, really, that should be something that shouldn't be that hard to do. Same thing with controlling the border and controlling visas. It's not that hard to do if you want to put some effort into it. But you've got a lot of people on both sides of the aisle. Democrats want as many of these people as possible to be voters one day. That's their goal. And Republicans, because they're bought out by Chamber of Commerce and the Wall Street Journal crowd, they want to facilitate illegal immigration because these guys benefit from it. Now, the rest of us, it sucks if you want to know everybody else, because the schools get overcrowded, the jails are overcrowded. I know they keep saying, well, there's really not that much crime from legal aliens. In places like Arizona where they've done studies, they found up to 20% of the jails are illegal aliens who've committed crimes. So there's a lot of it. And something else that's very interesting. I tried to pay a guy to go out and research how many illegal aliens are jailed for rapes, murders, all that kind of thing. And what we found is there's no statistics on it. There are no nationwide statistics on it. You cannot get them because they don't.
Well, there's some loose
that
statistics, actually. I think, and I wrote the article that I wrote for Right Wing News back in April. I think I used, but they were from, I think, the crime
There are some
Bureau.
statistics on it,
Yeah.
don't get me wrong. I'm saying that there's not, like, you can't just sit out and say, all right, how many illegal aliens are jailed in South Carolina? What crimes did they commit? They don't have that information. Now, there's other information out there that indicates, there are millions and millions of illegal aliens committing crimes. There are literally every day there are people raped and murdered by illegal aliens in the United States. But, that's the thing. And also keep in mind, too, even with legal immigration, there's a lot of welfare. I mean, roughly half the people we bring in this country is legal immigrants. Go on welfare, some form of welfare. I mean, what sense does it make to bring someone in our country who's just going to get on the dole? And roughly 50 to 60% of illegal aliens, also, if they have a kid here, they're on some form of welfare as a household.
It's economic suicide because we have a finite number of people contributing to the system and paying taxes. And when you have this open border, then it becomes possible for it to just infinitely grow, because these people just keep coming in, they keep getting on the dole, and then it's, like I said, it tends to be generational, where, these people came in their first generation on dependency programs, they have kids out of wedlock young, they have multiple kids, and then those families we also have to take care of. It just keeps growing exponentially, but the actual amount of people and the opportunities that are here for people to pay into the system to sustain it is a finite number. So it's insane. It's really fiscal suicide, purely.
We are importing poverty.
Exactly.
I mean, we're not bringing in people who are going to make the country richer and more prosperous. I mean, we could.
Oh, they're on hold. They're on a waiting list to come
Right, they're on a waiting list. Like the computer programmer from India who could come over here and make $90,000 a year and pay a ton of taxes. That guy is sitting at home in India trying to get $10,000 together so he can even apply. Now, the guy who, with a third-grade education who picks strawberries and he's 35 and in 10 years his knees will be shot and he'll have to go on Social Security, that guy's just walking across the border. And that's the problem. We could make an immigration system that would be extremely useful for us, but that is not the goal of the immigration system for Democrats. Because the more useful people you have, the people who are out there who are add to the tax base are doing well, a lot of those people aren't going to vote for them. That's what they want to import people who are not going to do as well. Because let's face it, if you come here and you end up on welfare, you're voting Democrat. Yeah. 90-10 or 80-20. So the more people like that, the better the Democrats do and the worse the country does. And that's sort of the situation we're getting into.
Wow. Well, listen, John, it's felt like 5 minutes, but we've actually been going for 50 now. This is fantastic. Anytime I have you on the show, it's always an enlightening conversation. It's always entertaining for me just to sit here and talk to you because I've always been a big admirer of you. Why don't you tell people where they can reach out and read your articles? I know you're on Town Hall and Right Wing News, but why don't you tell them yourself?
Well, as you said, rightwingnews.com. I do a column at Town Hall every week. I occasionally do them at PJ Media. I've got some other projects. I've got a book coming out early next year, which I will definitely be promoting on your show.
Oh, I can't wait.
Got a website coming up in December that's coming out. So we've got a lot of stuff going on. Some of it's just coming to fruition. It hasn't gone public yet, but we've definitely got some big things in the hopper.
All right. Well, thank you so much, John. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show. Please come back soon. I can't wait to see all your projects. That's the Julio Rivera Show for today. Thank you so much for everyone for listening. Catch the podcast on conservarican.com, the new and improved relaunch conservarican.com, and on lanterns.buzz, as well as Lanterns Radio Network on Spreaker. Thank you, and God bless.